disagreeing with Benjamin? Because, what he's saying is that
I'm agreeing
the SEC
with you.
put in the complaint fraud, and securities fraud is a criminal offense. So what he's saying is not incorrect. Just a matter of like the facts. And
as it relates to I think they could potentially bring a case for fraud. As it relates to Pulse, I agree 100% with you. Never going to happen. For all the exact same reasons that you articulated.
Is anyone viewing any of this as like a buying op for someone getting onto Pulse like just now, and instead of all the people that are hurt, maybe that got in early, or people that are worried they're down 90%? Look what happened with XRP and what the price was during the SEC investigation, and then what happened immediately after. Anyone thinking or taking any of that into account, or thinking maybe it could be a good opportunity?
Like hedge fund managers in the pharmaceutical and biotech world spend all day like reading over patents, patent litigation. So like one thing I'm trying to do here is foster community feedback to get as many ideas as possible. Like, is Pulsechain, because the Pulsechain community, the treasury is like in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
1.2 billion.
Yeah, just some gigantic number. And in crypto, those treasuries, if they're put to good use with developers and whatnot, are extremely valuable. There's risks on both sides. And the downside is, Richard's convicted and he goes to jail for 100 years and that's the end. I don't think that's going to happen. But the upside is, there's max pain, max fear right now. The price is depressed. If a criminal charges are brought, I think it goes much lower, like much, much lower, which is crazy to say, but much, much lower. And it's trying to understand that.
Well, let me ask you this.
Have we done the full leg? Or
if you were a believer to begin with in the technology, in what Pulsechain and what Hex brought, then whether he goes to prison or not, somebody eventually will step up. I'm just playing devil's advocate. And with or without that 1.2 billion, things will be developed. If the technology is sound, and it appears that it is, then nothing has changed other than this lawsuit, which I agree is no small thing. But at the end of the day, why wouldn't it at some point reverse if the technology is sound and if you believed in it from the beginning? If you didn't, I understand why you'd be skeptical. But
so I'm a blockchain maximalist. I think it's like the most important invention in a very long time. But on the other side of that, like I direct you to EOS, right? EOS essentially settled with the SEC. They raised like $1 billion, and they basically took the money and never invested it into developing EOS. And if you look at the price of EOS, it's down only. If you look at its price against Bitcoin, it's like just keeps making a lower low. Like it's actually sick and twisted what happened there. So I do think the treasury is super important. Like if the community, like this community is like rambunctious and unpredictable, and who knows what ideas people are thinking about. One thing I've been thinking about is like an open source longevity biomarker operation that's like guided by the GPTs and whatnot, and like that could be spectacular, and that could be like a wonderful thing for the human race. If we get a crypto bull market, maybe that could happen. If crypto goes to zero, probably not going to happen. Someone else might do it, but I'm certainly not going to do it. So it's kind of on that note, like if the treasury is unlocked and you get 9 figures and up to put into the ecosystem, a lot could happen. If the treasury is, the government is seeking disgorgement and, getting the money back, and at least perhaps returning the money to everybody, or, taking it all in fines and whatever else. And if that happens, like kind of the dream is over. So that's like, yes, the Pulsechain blockchain will continue, but, are we going to the moon? Are we doing the Renaissance, or, is everybody packing it up? So that's kind of where that goes.
I'm seeing opportunity well below SAC. And I kind of hope that we get a little downward pressure through all this. And I'm just thinking how people can't be a little bit optimistic, like seeing what happened with XRP. And I know that I shouldn't be talking about that coin right now. It's not the space. It's not the time. But
that took 3 years for that litigation to play out. That XRP case, that took 3 years, and it made a high of $3 in 2017 and did not make an all-time high in 2021.
Is optimism putting your mortgage into it, or is it putting 5% of your paycheck into it?
No, I would. Yeah, I mean, obviously, dude, if you're gonna take out a second mortgage and YOLO on some volatile shit, I mean, you're basically just a zero data expiration options trader at that point. I mean, we all, I would hope, would understand the risk associated with something like that. But I mean, I'm just thinking like, it's just hard for me not to see an opportunity here.
I agree completely. It's just, what's the risk reward ratio? How much are you willing to put in? I think there's absolutely opportunity, and to think otherwise would be crazy. It's just relative to your overall net worth or income, how much of that opportunity you choose to seize.
The question really is, are criminal charges going to be brought?
Like, well, that's the question I had for Boner, because he said that in the case of Hex, he could see that, and I'm just wondering how he sees that with Hex, because they would have to prove the ETH was actually recycled by Richard Hart, wouldn't they?
I don't believe that Richard did anything wrong. It's just not in his persona as I understand him to be. Doesn't mean I'm right. But that's where I felt there was a bigger probability. I don't feel he will be convicted, even if they do. Again, I believe he's an honest guy. I believe he does want to do right. That could be very ignorant on my part. But that's the avenue that I see that they have to bring those charges. I just don't see any avenue to bring him on the Pulsechain side. So don't misunderstand what I said, thinking that he will be brought up on criminal charges. And I don't know that they've got jack. I mean, I'm not a blockchain analyst, so all I have is what I've seen Richard do over the last 4 years, and I've seen, what he said over the last 4 years, and it just, maybe he's absolutely duped everybody, present company included, and maybe he is a criminal. I don't believe that to be the case at all.
Yeah, I don't believe that to be the case, and I don't think they'll have anything criminally against him. My main concern has always been that this drags out like it did with XRP, and that they deem Pulsechain a security because of an illegal ICO, but they deem Hex ultimately not a security.
So that's okay if all of that happens. First of all, I don't think they're going to go to jury because they keep losing. Mm-hmm. I don't think a judge is going to rule for the SEC in a summary judgment, which means that then they're going to jury. And I think the SEC would be pooping in their pants at that point, because if they don't get 51% of the jury to say it was an ICO, which is up for grabs, maybe they will, maybe they won't. It says in writing, no expectations, political statement, all that. And the SEC loses, again, like, it's open season on the SEC. Anyone could do, like, they lost to XRP. That's pretty, like, blasphemous and ridiculous. But to lose to Richard Hart, I don't know. And this is why it's like, to me, he's going to settle. If criminal charges aren't brought, he's going to settle with the SEC. And the criminal charges, so I'm just reading the complaint again. Fraud in connection with the purchase or sale of a security, and fraud in the offer or sale of a security. So, fraud.
It looks like a security. It definitely looks like one, but I guess they would have to prove whether.
No, not necessarily, because this is just the SEC. Like, I'm thinking a step ahead, like the criminal case. So even if you do commodities manipulation, you could still be criminally liable for that. So the difference is they're going to be going toe-to-toe legally with a whale. I think Tether had a criminal case against the New York Attorney General.
When they're talking about recycling the ETH, are they talking about recycling the ETH from the AMM back into, like, the token itself? Or, because, like, some of the on-chain things that I saw Richard do, right? It's like, all right, he set it up so that he could claim his free Bitcoin. Hex did that, staked it for big payday. And, everyone thought they were going to get 30% more, but then he came in the last day, just like he did in the Pulsechain sacrifice and the Pulsechain sacrifice, where, everyone sacked the first day, and then on the 14th or 17th day, he comes in and gives the same price back. He's also, I'm pretty sure he's recycled Pulsechain sack money into Pulsex and places like that. So I've definitely seen him, like, recycle tokens. And then also what he did, I haven't seen him necessarily sell any Hex, but, he sacked all that Hex that he got from Bitcoin and Big Payday. And then, is pulling money out of the sacrifice on the back end. Also, optically, it's like, when Pulsechain and Pulsex sack was coming out, there are all these large valuations on billions of dollars being sacrificed. But the majority of that was just, paper gains on the Hex that couldn't have been pulled out by Richard anyway.
So when you say you saw him do this stuff, yeah, are you just, like, assuming it was him? Do you, like, have proof that it was him that was doing these things?
I mean, it's all connected from, things that are going from the hex.win address and then finding its way,
So when you say these things, try to think about it like this.
Yeah.
You're a prosecutor and you have to convince the jury of 12 peers beyond a reasonable doubt that this person's guilty. Like, we have to take this person's freedom away because they're a menace to society. And will you and the other side is fighting for his life, and he's going to do everything possible, hiring all the experts to say you're wrong, X, Y, and Z. When you say this, is this like your speculation that this is his money or his control of the money, or do you like know that he controls Hex Win and you know whatever else you saw the transactions being recycled? Like, do you know it's him, or are you speculating that that's him?
I mean, it's speculation, but how do you prove that at all? It has to go
Exactly.
through,
Exactly.
it has to go through an exchange, right? So then you would have to.
So they accuse him of actually going through an exchange in the complaint. They say 94 to 97%. Here, let me pull up the exact language. So yeah, it's speculation, right?
Which
But
doesn't
they're
hold
going to
up.
have to prove it. You know, OJ walked, right? OJ was obviously guilty. He was guilty civilly. He had to pay the family like 50 mil or whatever it was, but he walked in the criminal court.
Think about some of
during
like
the
the
adoption
early
amplifier.
devs and some of those people that stepped out, you know, because they saw fraudulent shit. I mean, do you think there's any of those as witnesses that can?
I'm not aware of that. Talk more about that. I'm not familiar with any of that. And if you have any data to show it, you know, feel free to pin it in the chat here. Just put it in the comments, or I'll pin it or whatever.
There was just that early dev that stepped down in 2019 that said that there was just fraudulent shit going on, so he didn't want to be there anymore. You know, and it seemed like some of those early. I mean, I wasn't around, right? I came in during the bull, unfortunately, but you know, it seemed in 2019 he had a full website with, you know, different people on the marketing team, and they all had headshots, and you know, there was people that were kind of going against Richard and coming after him for this being a, you know, Ponzi, and he would either block them or make threats. And then there was that dev. I mean, you can look it up. It was in 2019 that stepped down from the project, and then we never really knew who the dev was. But maybe some of those early sort of devs could potentially, you know, be witnesses in the case, some of the early sort of things.
I doubt they'd be willing to sacrifice their own anonymity in that situation if people don't already actually know who they are. That you said they do.
Yeah, they're public people.
I mean, the only way I would see them taking a stand or putting their face out there as almost a target, if you will, by like a huge community would just be that they were being, what's the phrase where you get asked and told something at the same time. They're asking you to speak, they're telling you you have to, which they may well. It just seems like something that me as a person, even with some early opinions against something like this, I would be very hesitant to get on a stand and wag my finger at Richard Hart. I think anyone would be hesitant to do that.
I mean, they could be in it for the whistleblower money too, you know?
Yeah, huge. The whistleblower money could be huge in this case, you know? But
That's
that's
a good-
the thing. Can it be? Because it seems like this money's on chain and he could just say, I lost the keys. You know, it's not like they could seize it in a bank account. There's a lot going on here, a lot of different angles. Very
say they were never
interesting
his
about the
keys in
developer
the
that
first
stepped
place,
down.
though.
Very interesting. Very interesting about the developer that stepped down. I'm also seeing here for the trail that they have to prove. Oh, so one other thing I thought about was that I think Tornado Cash went live in the summer of 2019. And the Hex, it wasn't a token sale. What was it called? I call it a token generation event.
Adoption amplifier.
The Hex adoption amplifier was not until December 2019. Is that correct?
Late November 2019, I believe.
Yeah, so Tornado Cash existed before then, and Tornado Cash wasn't illegal to use at the time. So it's, you know, and that's, so I wonder how they get the recycling of funds. So they accuse him of using the mixer for the Pulsechain money, and I'd be very interested to see how they map those transactions. I think that might be based on time. For example, like, and that's why it comes down to like, like if he did do these things, did he use these data privacy tools properly? And you know, everyone's entitled to data privacy. Not everybody's like laundering money for cartels. Like maybe you want privacy. So did he use it properly, or did he like deposit and then withdraw like a minute later? And that's like how that's basically like you could point better than 50-50 that this person withdrew. Whereas if you leave it in there for some time, then it's like a different story. It's much harder to prove. But he withdraw it immediately? And then if he did withdraw it immediately, perhaps they'd be able to show that in a civil case, criminal case. They could just say, no, I didn't withdraw it immediately. It's very hard to, I really wonder. So they accused him 94 to 97% of these F deposits were recycling transactions. We need to get more on that. Manipulation of a commodity could be a criminal thing. So, you're speculating that he did it. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but they have to prove it criminally beyond a reasonable doubt to really bring this project to zero.
Is that manipulation, or is that just using the tools? I just
Well, if you're like manipulating people's psychology to make them think that more people have put money in, or the price is higher, or the price is lower, or more people have adopted, amplified, whatever. Yeah.
No, that makes a little more sense, I guess, as to why that's making more sense. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. And again, to Benjamin's point before, they do, accuse securities fraud, but they haven't brought the case yet. So this was brought in August, I believe, and we're in September. Again, Richard Hart has not been served yet. This was brought July 31st, 2023. So we're 5 weeks in. Now, I did receive, I asked the community, has criminal case ever been brought, significant period of time after the civil case? And I had OG Faraday, who was really great, and someone else, provide 4 examples where that did happen, specifically in crypto. And even in the case of Arthur Hayes, CFTC came after him. He settled for like $100 million. So now it's been 5 weeks, but at the same time, Richard Hart still has not been served, right? So the SEC has not provided service onto Richard Hart. And Richard Hart knows that he's being sued. They just can't find him, I guess. And, because he's posting, potential legal arguments here, none of which address the hex manipulation claim. But he has stated on, Peter McCormick interview, check the chain analysis. I think it's possible the hex God Whale was an Ethereum ICO participant. And if you were an Ethereum ICO participant, it's unlikely anyone's ever going to figure out who you were, because that was kind of before Bitcoin was traced and Ethereum only accepted Bitcoin. So, and what if you were mining Bitcoin, put that Bitcoin in the Ethereum ICO, and then there's no ID ever, and you never brought those coins to an exchange? I'm sorry, who was speaking? Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, the God will was an ETH Genesis will. You're correct. That's all.
And it was a tremendous amount of ETH, right? Was it like 400,000 ETH?
I believe it was like 350 to 400,000 ETH. Yeah.
Jeez. I mean, that person was a real visionary, and they never moved the coins, right, until they bought all that hex.
I don't believe many of them were moved. I believe that's correct. Yes.
And the hex, I mean, the ETH ICO was 30 cents a coin. So if you got 400 ETH, it's what, like $40,000? $120,000 they put in? Wow, they put in $120,000 and they turned that into what, like $1 billion at the current price? Or whatever, several hundred million. So, yeah, I mean, who knows? The SEC complaint does charge fraud. I don't think they charged XRP with fraud. Let's see what they charged XRP with. Ripple Labs complaint. Here we go. Let's see the charges they bring. I don't think they bring a fraud charge. Okay, we're at the end. First claim for relief, violations of Securities Act, aiding and abetting violations of Securities Act. That's pretty good. So, to Benjamin's point, XRP was not charged with fraud. In fact, the word fraud is only mentioned in the XRP complaint one time. Let's see what they charge Coinbase with. Coinbase SEC complaint. SEC charges Coinbase operating unregistered securities exchange, blah, blah, blah. SEC complaint. Yeah, they don't charge SEC with fraud. They don't charge Coinbase with fraud either. So I don't know. Maybe I'm changing my tune. Maybe it doesn't look so good for us because neither Coinbase nor XRP had fraud charges. Violations of Security Act, violations of Exchange Act, violation of Exchange Act, violation of Exchange Act. So both XRP and Coinbase did not have fraud charges. Richard Hart has fraud charges.
I'll say one of the things that the SEC has winning in is staking being a security. We saw Kraken kind of roll over and pay $30 million.
Wait, but with Kraken, it was because they were custodians of your money and Kraken was paying you the money, whereas in Web3 DeFi world, the code itself pays you. So that was custodial staking, which I actually do think is a security. I believe custodial staking is a security, whereas I do not think non-custodial staking, like you control your own coins, you generating your own yield, I don't think that is a security. And even if it is, I don't really care. To me, the whole thing is the price of Hex Pulsechain going to lose another zero? because criminal charges are going to be brought. They did not accuse XRP and Coinbase of fraud. They do accuse Richard Hart of fraud. Securities fraud is a criminal violation. So, but it wasn't brought yet. OG Faraday, CFTC was reportedly probing BitMEX in July 2019. They didn't announce a charge until 2020, same time as DOJ charges, right? Look at Binance case by SEC for fraud. I don't think the DOJ has charged Binance yet, though, right? They're all waiting. May charge. Nope. DOJ has not charged Binance yet. The SEC, I'm sure they've sued them. SEC, Binance. SEC charges. Yeah, they just lit it up. Who said that? That was a really good point. Crypto B 33. Thank you. Binance Holdings. Let's see what they charge them with here. You guys are doing a really great job. Like the community, this is amazing. It's giving me new thoughts, new ideas. I hope it's worth it for everybody else. Wow. So the SEC went really hard against the Binance. 13 claims. Violation. Yeah, so the word fraud is used in the Binance complaint 17 times. Fraud and deceit upon and made false misleading statements to investors. Yeah, so this is more fraud. So the Binance complaint, SEC uses the term fraud 17 times. Coinbase and XRP is just like once or twice with no real charge there. Whereas in the Hex complaint, let's see, fraud is used 10 times.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, so it's weird. The claims for relief, they're actually accusing Richard Hart of fraud.
They're probably trying to come at this shit from different angles because they have been coming up fucking losers recently.
They didn't provide any transaction hashes or anything though. When they accused them of fraud, they didn't provide any transaction hash.
Right. I mean, maybe they're still building the case. Maybe they're saving the juice for, because maybe they don't have to necessarily tip their hand right now. They could wait until the case kind of starts to kind of put all their evidence out there. And I think that's smarter for them because they could continue like if they have something basically, right? They have enough to proceed here. But I think
you don't want to. It's just like any lawsuit. I mean, you wouldn't want to show your cards too early,
right? So they probably think they have something and they want to continue building the case. They want to keep probing Chainalysis or whoever they're using for the blockchain and forensics investigation. Like, make this stronger. And I think they can release that at some point in the future after the case gets going, when they have to put all their cards on the table. But again, if Richard is the Hex God whale, and that God whale was from the Ethereum Genesis event, which means they accepted Bitcoin like way before KYC, like way before anything was going, and perhaps that Bitcoin was even mined, and that Ethereum was never taken to an exchange. That is very difficult to tie an identity to. We'll see. I mean, this is tough. This is tough, guys. I don't know. When coming into this, I didn't think Pulsechain would have criminal charges. I still don't think it will, but the SEC has fraud charges in there, and securities fraud is, criminal felony. But it does say in writing, you have no expectations. So the felony there would be that he stole the money to buy diamonds. But I don't think my gut tells me that a criminal case is not going to be brought there because it says in writing, you have no expectations. So then it's really back to the Hex manipulation, and we'll see if they can or not, and perhaps, the cryptography was used properly, and it'll be impossible to prove who owns what.